A small warning, this video has massive spoilers for the first Oxenfree game. Play it before you watch this. Seriously, it's incredible, you're gonna love it. What is your story about? Go ahead, tell me. A knight trying to slay a dragon? A detective solving a mystery? A monster in the woods? Okay, well, that's not quite what I meant. Let me rephrase. What is your story trying to say? What is your theme? You might say you don't know, or your story doesn't have a theme, and let me stop you right there because, yes, it does. A theme doesn't need to be a big grand statement of morality. It can be something as simple as spending time with your friends can make you happy. Whether you intend it or not, every story has something to say. Your story will always speak to someone. That's the entire reason we tell them, to connect with each other. A lot of writers find that their themes pop up as they write, and they'll build them more intentionally from there. This happened for me. My webcomic, Tip the Ferryman, which you can read at the link in the description below, is a paranormal mystery about a retired ghost hunter trying to solve the disappearance of spirits around the city. But there's also a really important element of this world. All the characters have special powers tied to their personalities, or what makes them who they are. It's how the main character is able to see ghosts. Around the time I was writing Chapter 5 of the story, I started to realize that a lot of the character arcs I had planned revolved around the theme of identity, or more specifically, the idea that nobody can decide who you are for you. Once I realized this, I started building aspects of the world, characters, and plot to reflect this. The intentional tie-ins of themes makes your writing stronger and rewards your readers for paying attention to this aspect of your writing. So, how do you make a theme intentionally? How do you purposely tie your plot, world, and characters to what you're trying to say? Lucky for us, there's one cool little book we can use to figure this out. Invisible Ink by Brian McDonald. Brian is a writer who's worked for companies such as Disney, Pixar, and Dark Horse. His resume is pretty impressive, honestly, and it really shows in his books about writing. Invisible Ink is about the unseen building blocks writers use to make their writing stronger. The book uses multiple well-known films to illustrate examples of its points, but today I'd like to turn our gaze to something different. Video games. Using what Invisible Ink has to say about theme, I'd like to pick apart one of my favorite video games to help you learn how to use themes in your writing and make it stronger. And that game is Night School's Oxenfree. You've seen the title and thumbnail, you know this. But before we get too deep down this rabbit hole, let's see what Brian McDonald has to say about theme. Brian provides an anecdote about sculpting, and how sculptors need to build a base before they begin their sculptures. This is referred to as an armature, which Brian goes on to use as a term for themes. Quote, "Before you begin writing, you must build your armature. For us storycrafters, the armature is the idea upon which we hang our story. It is what has been called theme." Brian also states that your theme can't just be a word, it needs to be a sentence. He uses the example of competition. In his words, just saying my theme is competition is like saying my theme is red. It doesn't say anything. Now, something like competition leads to hard work is a theme. That's a sentence, an idea. Once you have that, you have the base to build your story off of. Keeping Brian's observations in mind, I'd like to finally take a look at Oxenfree and how it uses its theme to build its characters, world, and plot. So, Oxenfree. Oxenfree is a game released in 2016 about 5 teenagers getting trapped in a time loop on Edwards Island. It's an abandoned military base haunted by the people who drowned off the coast of the island in a freak submarine accident decades ago. Using radio waves and time travel shenanigans, Alex and her friends must find a way to break the loop and get off the island before it's too late. The game deals heavily with the idea of grief. All the characters have dealt with a huge loss in their life or are anticipating one to come. So, is Oxenfree's theme grief? Well, that's what's at its core, but what is it saying about grief? Whenever I was playing through this game with my brother Tommy, we got into a bit of a discussion about this, and he summed up the theme of Oxenfree in a very eloquent way. Losing yourself in grief can make others grieve too. So, how does Oxenfree communicate its theme to us? There are 2 primary ways that it does this, through its setting and through its characters. As a writer, you never want to flat out explain everything to your audience. The old saying of show don't tell may come to mind here. And while yes, outright explaining things sometimes is just fine, you do want to keep your audience entertained while also trusting their intelligence. Even if you're writing for young children, you need to have faith in your audience and not talk down to them. Trust that you are writing for someone who will understand your work. And if you want to be extra sure what you're saying gets across in a subtle way, hire a beta reader, someone who will look over your work and give you feedback. That all being said, let's go over the ways that Oxenfree subtly communicates its theme to us, and how you, as a writer, can use its tricks in your own story. Edwards Island is an abandoned military base turned tourist trap. There's monuments to history all over the island. Multiple radio stations have been set up for you to learn about the island's history, including the military base that it was once home to. Fort Milner began operating during World War II, but shut down not long after the USS Cannalola was blown up off the side of the coast of the island, seemingly killing all 97 passengers inside. The one and only resident of the island is Maggie Adler, an old woman who used to work at Fort Milner before it shut down. Following this incident, Maggie discovered that the passengers of the Cannalola didn't actually die. When a nuclear reactor core imploded, it separated them from this dimension and sent them to some kind of purgatory where they all slowly lost their minds. They can still reach out to people on Edwards Island via radio signal, though, and tampering with radios around the island can cause all sorts of crazy paranormal happenings. If you open a gate to this purgatory-like place, this can cause time loops throughout the island. Got all that? Okay, good, because everything I've just said ties directly into the themes of Oxenfree. Let's start with the most obvious, the time loops. Throughout the game, you'll find yourself getting looped back to the same moment over and over again. Other characters will experience these loops too while you're away. For instance, Nona swears she saw Alex, who mocked her in regards to her grandfather, who, from the way Nona talks about him, is likely dead. Alex swears that she didn't remember doing this, though. These time loops will cause you to witness the deaths of your friends over and over again, undo death entirely, and even send you back to the past to change things. Alex will constantly find herself sent back in time to speak to her brother Michael, who drowned shortly before the events of the game. If you pick the right options, you can make it to where Michael never actually died, but there's one big thing about these loops. They continue even after you leave the island. Once you're off the island at the end of the game, you'll find yourself being sent back to the very beginning. Everything you did in your last play session, gone. Doesn't matter. Nothing you do can change what happened. And that's just it, isn't it? These loops can just continue forever. Alex can keep asking herself, what can I do to change things? What can I do to bring Michael back? To prevent the awful things from happening to my friends? But there's nothing that she can do. These loops are out of her hand, and so long as the Sunken, the victims of the USS Cannalola explosion, are grieving the loss of their own lives, they will cause grief to the people around them. That's leaning a bit more into characters and setting, but the Sunken are so intrinsically tied to how this game's world functions that I think we can count it as world building. Here we have an example of what we'll call a magic system for the sake of simplicity, displaying the themes of the story. The Sunken can influence time, causing you to loop through the same moment again and again and again. This illustrates how they harm others in a fit of their own grief, and how cycles of grief works. You'll often hear about the bargaining stage of grief, where you again and again and again ask yourself what you could have done, when really there's nothing to be done. What happened, happened. And there's no one doing it. And if you keep trying to find ways to go back and fix it, it'll only cause you problems as you go on. By drowning in your grief, you are causing yourself and the others around you harm. If you want to replicate this in your own writing, think about what you want to say with the story and how you can use your magic system to reflect it, assuming that you have one. How can the rules of your world display what you want to say without saying it? Have ghosts in your story who represent how the past can always come back to haunt you. If your fantasy story is about the harm of conformity, maybe the magic system is separated into types that you must match perfectly to join. You know, like in the Owl House. Those are some admittedly easy examples, but I hope it gets across what I'm trying to convey here. Take what you're saying, and, if your story has a magic system, figure out a way that the system and/or societal rules around it can reflect your theme. Edwards Island as a setting itself is also a great example of theme being set up through the world. It's an old, kinda run-down tourist trap that's a monument to the tragedy that happened there. Fort Milner hasn't been touched since the incident with the USS Cannalola. Maggie Adler has been living on her own, surrounded by the very thing that haunts her. The island is covered in old, rusting machinery and buildings. While I wouldn't go so far as to say it causes anyone but Maggie much grief, it is reflective of the first half of the theme. Drowning in grief. It's a time capsule to everything horrible that occurred on this island years ago, one that nobody dares to open beyond a passing glance. A quick visit with the kids, a party on the beach, but stay away from those caves. And don't mind the strange sounds coming from Fort Milner. So, where does your story take place? If it's about how sections of the world are often forgotten in your ever-growing technological society, maybe it takes place in a small rundown town. Is your story about how escapism and fantasy can't erase reality? Maybe make it take place in a magical world connected to the human realm. You know, like in the Owl House. I've been thinking about the Owl House a lot lately. Honestly, I should do a video on that. Anyway, point is, make your setting appropriate for the story that you're telling, and this will help reflect the theme that you're going for. Now, let's move on to our biggest contributor to Oxenfree's story and themes. Its characters. For the sake of this video not being a million years long, I'll only be examining the characters through the lens of what I consider to be the game's good ending, where you grow closer with everybody in the group, find all the Maggie Adler letters, Ren and Nona get together, and you save Clarissa in the end. So, with that in mind, let's talk about Alex and her friends. All 5 of these kids tie back to Oxenfree's theme in some way, shape, or form. Alex is someone who recently lost her brother. She seems to be coping with it well on the surface, but throughout the game you'll notice she tends to take on a lot of blame and responsibility. Ren is Alex's childhood best friend. Though he hasn't quite lost anyone yet, he does somewhat passive-aggressively bring up the fact that Alex is thinking about going out of state for college. Jonas is Alex's new stepbrother, who she just met tonight. He lost his mother to cancer and is now filling Michael's role, someone who he's never met. Clarissa is the catty mean girl of the group. She's only here because Nona is here. She was dating Michael when he died and heavily blames Alex for his death. Nona's a sweet, quiet girl with a truancy streak. Though she does allude to a dead grandfather, a lot of her grief comes from her worries about Clarissa. When it comes to characters and themes, all of your characters should embody some part of your theme, either by being examples of it or adding another thought to the mix. Stories can have multiple themes. In fact, I'd say you'd be hard-pressed to find anything not made for extremely young audiences that only has one thing to say. Let's go over how Oxenfree's characters connect to its theme. Starting with our protagonist, Alex. She's someone who lost her brother soon before the start of the story. She and Michael were extremely close, and his death hit her extremely hard. That red jacket she wears used to belong to him. They used to come to Edward's Island together all the time, and we even see in these flashbacks that Clarissa tagged along in at least one of these expeditions. For the most part, Alex doesn't cause anyone grief. In fact, even in the good ending, Alex has a lot of chances to cause herself grief. Many of the dialogue options involve Alex blaming herself for everything that's happening on the island, and it is notable that she's consistently the one who tries to break the time loops. There's a lot of self-blame in Alex's character, so by drowning in her loss over Michael, she is causing herself grief. This is, of course, very exemplified by Clarissa, but I don't think Clarissa would be able to hit so hard if some of that self-blame wasn't already there. But there is one small thing that she does to another person. She villainizes Clarissa. Now, I know, that sounds insane. Clarissa is objectively a bully who will take her anger out on Alex. I'm not denying that. Obviously, Clarissa's kind of like queen bee bitch, right? But I'm not talking about Clarissa as she is now. I'm talking about Clarissa as Michael knew her. Alex will often tell Jonas that Clarissa saw her as an annoying little sister who got in the way of her and Michael's relationship, but from what we see, that's not at all true. In the flashback, Clarissa expresses gratitude that she even got to spend time with Alex and hopes that the 3 of them can hang out more. Their conversation is nothing but pleasant. It seems that the perception of Clarissa today is infecting Alex's view of the Clarissa from yesterday. And yes, while many of these conflicts are Clarissa's own doing, I do think it's notable that this perception causes a bit of a resentment in Alex, which, yeah, I imagine doesn't really help things. This is a small thing that you may or may not even notice on your first playthrough. I've played this game a million times, and I only really caught it whenever I played it again with my brother Tommy. She's a scared, grieving kid, though. Who can really blame her? And it's not like she's actively lashing out at anyone. Alex is extremely kind and patient with the people around her. But that doesn't make her immune to the way that grief can blind you. Grief can make you blind to reality. Moving on to Ren. Ren is, for the most part, a laid-back, sociable stoner with a bit of an anxiety problem. He gets freaked out easily and is prone to rambly panic when things go wrong, something he usually solves via edibles. As said before, Ren doesn't mention having lost anyone in his life, and nothing in the game hints towards that. So, what could Ren possibly be grieving? Well, it's Alex. Ren is engaging in some sort of anticipatory grief. He's anxious that Alex will leave the state for college, and now she's got this cool, new, older brother to hang out with instead of him. At the start of the game, you have the option to hang back to talk to Jonas without Ren being there, something that makes Ren feel uneasy. Later, when Ren and Jonas get into an argument with each other, they both try to make Alex be the deciding factor in it. She, however, won't take sides and assures both of them that she still loves them. Ren isn't outright mean to anyone, at least not until his argument with Jonas, but it's clear to me that he is very afraid of losing Alex as a friend. This fear, combined with the stress of what's happening on the island, causes him to lash out at Jonas, causing the entire group grief in the long run. He's so caught up in losing Alex that he might just risk pushing her away. Grief can make you desperate, and through that, you may do more harm than good. Jonas doesn't talk about his grief too much. His mother comes up sporadically, but in meaningful ways. He grew up poor, and he talks about how his mom always took him on the same vacation spot every single year. At the time, he hated it, but now that his mother has passed from cancer, he views them as containers of memories. Jonas is obviously desperate to see his mother again. When he believes her voice is coming through a radio in the bunker, he begs Alex for an opportunity to speak to her again. Jonas wants his family back. He wants that familial connection, and now he's here. An odd one out in a friend group full of people he doesn't know, people who know each other and knew the person he's essentially replacing, but they don't know him. Jonas is grieving the loss of a complete family, and like Alex, he causes both himself and others grief through this. He'll often put himself in the role of a protector for Alex, for instance, volunteering to handle an electrical box instead of her in case one of them gets shocked. Due to his lack of connections here, he views himself as the lesser of the group and puts himself in frequent danger. His conflict with Ren also causes him to look to Alex for support, his new sister, who he hopes would back him up. When she sides with neither of them, though, it creates a bit of tension. Jonas calls Ren a resident burnout and starts looking down on him from here on out. The two of them don't get along very well, and Jonas's view of Ren is very skewed by his want for a connection with others in the group. Specifically with Alex. Just like Ren, Jonas's story shows us that grief can make you desperate, and for that, you may do more harm than good. Nona, like Ren, doesn't mention any dead family members or friends. She does briefly reference a grandfather who may or may not be dead, but aside from that, it seems like she hasn't suffered any significant loss. But she has. In a way, she's lost Clarissa. Nona can tell Alex a story about a time that Clarissa was extremely kind to her. One of their mutual friends had gotten into a car accident on Nona's birthday, so instead of celebrating the big day, they were all visiting this friend in the hospital. But even after all of that, Clarissa showed up to Nona's home with a huge birthday cake, where they proceeded to watch movies all night long. We know Clarissa used to be a kinder person. It was losing Michael that made her bitter and angry. Nona has been witnessing this change in her friend from the front row. She constantly worries about Clarissa throughout the game and allows Clarissa to be very clingy with her. Nona is actively losing someone she cherishes to their grief. She's anticipating a complete and utter loss of her friend, and she's been scrambling to see what she can do to stop it. Losing yourself in grief makes others grieve too. And then there's Clarissa. Oh, I could say so much about Clarissa. She's the strongest written character in this game, which is saying a lot because, oh my god, these characters are brilliantly written. Once upon a time, she was a kind, good-natured person. She and Michael were planning on getting out of Kamina, a small town where everyone knows everyone, that they're both incredibly sick of. But when Alex convinced Michael to take her swimming one last time, Michael drowned, and Alex could do nothing to save him. When Michael died, Clarissa lost so much. She lost her life partner, her plans for the future, her ticket out of the shitty town that she hated. Sure, okay, maybe she has other options, but she doesn't see that now. She can't see that now. Everything she was looking forward to was ripped away from her, and that anger, that bitterness reflects onto Alex, the only person who was with Michael when he died. She could have done something, Clarissa tells herself. If she had just done something, I wouldn't have lost so much. Clarissa becomes a bully. She's hostile with everyone around her, except for Nona. She belittles and berates Alex and blames her for her brother's death. When Jonas is around, she becomes even snippier. To her, Jonas is just a replacement for the boy that she loves so much. It's through this bitterness that the Sunken are able to take over Clarissa. They control her with ease when they talk about Ren being difficult to speak through. She becomes their puppet, the person they tempt Alex into giving up. Their mentalities are very similar, both of them acting extremely childish and selfishly in their grief, believing that their suffering is so great that they've earned the right to be cruel. Through Clarissa, the Sunken even say that people like Ren and Jonas have gone through nothing. They're just children compared to them. They feel that their anger, their harm of other people, it's righteous, it's justice. The Sunken aren't trapped on the island. Nobody is forcing Clarissa to stay in Kamina, but they're too scared. So angered by what happened to them, what they've lost, that they stay where they are, harming the people around them in a crusade for nothing. They are so blinded by their grief that they can't see the grief that they are causing others. And when they do, well, isn't it the right thing to do? Finally, we have Maggie Adler. It was Maggie's mistake that doomed the Sunken. She believed the distress signal from the Canalola was an attempt to jam radar, so in a panic, she gave the signal to the other members of Fort Milner. Investigate and bomb if necessary. The Canalola sank from friendly fire, and it was all because of one mistake. Years later, Maggie and her friend Anne would discover the Canalola crew members hadn't actually died, they just shifted realities. Anne and Maggie would try to figure out a way to communicate with the Sunken, but through this, they had opened up a gate. One that would lead to the Sunken taking control of Anne, and Maggie running in fear from her partner, leaving her to the Sunken's whims. To quote Maggie herself, "Of all of my regrets, perhaps the deepest is knowing that Anne's last vision was of me fleeing from her in terror." Maggie feels that what she did to Anne was cowardly, especially since she was the one who caused the ship to be blown up in the first place. After this, she dedicates her entire life to undoing her mistakes. She buys the island, influences government officials where she can, lives in solitude on the island, spending every waking minute trying to fix her mistakes. She dies before she gets the chance to, and the responsibility is passed down to the next generation, Alex and her friends. Maggie had trapped herself alone in her grief, caused herself pain for years to come, and this would later be passed down without a solution in sight. You see what I'm getting at, right? All these characters tie into the game's theme. They display different aspects of it, different perspectives, the many consequences and ways this sort of thing can manifest and affect people's lives. They all have something to say about the core theme, and many of them overlap and tie their characters together. Ren and Nona, who can potentially become a couple if you play your cards right, are both dealing with anticipated losses. They haven't lost anyone yet, not really, but they're both terrified of doing so. This ties their characters together in a very subtle way, and ultimately makes their relationship feel a lot stronger. If you want to achieve this in your own writing, you need to heavily consider perspective and what role your characters serve in your message. What does this character think of this? Why do they think this way? What actions come from this perspective? What challenges their worldview? Is this character an example of the negative aspects of your theme, or the positive aspects? Or is it much more complicated than a simple good versus bad? Find ways to make them overlap. Maybe like Ren and Nona, they're dealing with the same thing but react to it in different ways. Ren lashes out while Nona placates the people around her. A lot of writing is asking questions and giving answers. And like I said before, you likely won't know your theme until you're a bit into what you're writing. That's perfectly fine and normal. You haven't failed as a writer if you don't magically know what your theme is from the start. You also haven't failed as a writer if you don't follow anything I've said so far. Remember, art doesn't have any rules, just suggestions. There are absolutely ways to break all the conventions I've brought up in this video, and if you think you're prepared as a writer to do it, go for it. I'm really excited to see what you create. I'd also like to do a small note. I don't have a lot to say on this, but I did want to talk about some motifs and imagery that are used in Oxenfree. Motifs and imagery are a cool way to build up some cohesion in your story as well. Oxenfree makes usage of triangles in its backgrounds constantly. The gates to communicate with the Sunken are triangles, a lot of architecture for Fort Milner is triangular, especially in the windows. It's in the logo, the trees are very triangular, it's like even the shape of Michael's room in the final flashback. It doesn't say anything about the theme. It does constantly remind us of the gates to the Sunken and what we have to look out for. Radios are also a consistent piece of imagery. Radio static shows up in the soundtrack, it's a core mechanic of the game, a lot of the lore revolves around usage of radios. When you go through time loops, you see a lot of distortion, static, and you hear a lot of radio buffering, just all kinds of stuff like that. It's little things like this that can make your story feel a lot more cohesive, adding little reminders everywhere to your audience. So, let's go over what we've learned. A theme must be a sentence. It can't be a simple thing like grief. What is your story saying about grief? Refer back to the quotes from Invisible Ink. Your setting should be something appropriate for your story. Think about where you'd want this to take place and how you can make it tie into your theme. If you're writing something in an unrealistic setting, how can you tie things like magic systems into your theme? Tying your characters to your theme requires considering the character's perspective on the subject and what role they serve in the message that you're trying to send. You can strengthen this by having characters intertwine and clash with one another. Ask yourself what these conflicts and crossovers say about your theme. Hopefully this will make it a bit easier for you guys to incorporate themes into your story. If you want a few more pointers on this, check out Invisible Ink by Brian McDonald. A link to his website will be in the description. And hey, play Oxenfree. It's a fantastic, underrated gem, and I didn't even go over all the endings. There's so much more to be learned from this wonderful game. I'd also like to thank my brother Tommy. He helped me out a lot with this video by bouncing ideas off the wall with me while we were playing this game. Love you, dude. I promise I won't bash your head in with a raw Cain and Abel style. Not anytime soon, anyway. If you want more videos like this about writing advice, the occasional review, and general art stuff, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to get notified about whenever I make more videos. And hey, if you like spooky stories about ghosts like Oxenfree, maybe check out my webcomic, Tip the Ferryman. It's about ghosts, identity, and cool powers that you get from being yourself. Link will be in the description below. That's all for now. Y'all have a nice day.